I want to begin by saying there are two Latin words that always comes to me because it reminds me of who I am. The two Latin words are exitus and reditus. Exitus means everything comes out of God. Reditus, everything returns to God. That is what life is all about. God gives and He takes it back. And listening this evening to the Secretary General in his remarks continues to remind us where we stand in our lives. Everything is under His control. We just have to pray. We just have to trust Him. And so we place our thoughts and our minds in prayer and ask Him to bless us and to continue to guide us all in our journey.
Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, and members of your delegation, Deputy Prime Minister and Ministers of Cabinet, the Honourable Speaker, Leader of the Opposition, and members of Parliament, His Honour the Chief Justice and members of the Judiciary, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct honour and privilege to welcome you all to this special dinner in honour of our esteemed guest, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. We are pleased, sir, that you have followed through your commitment to visit our Blue Pacific region, where the situation of vulnerabilities are stark, and to be able to witness some of our lived realities as small island states. Your visit marks a significant milestone, coinciding with the 10th anniversary of the last visit by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in 2014. Tonight we gather to express our deep appreciation for your invaluable advocacy towards the special case of small islands developing states like Samoa to achieve resilient prosperity, but also to be able to do it together with the international community through global cooperation. Furthermore, you have consistently maintained that SIDS are the test case for both climate and financial justice, and that we are the world's conscience in the climate crisis. As small island economies, we continue to aim for amplified ambition in our climate actions. We are heartened that there is dedication towards deep reforms to the outdated, dysfunctional, and unjust global financial architecture, so that an appropriate financial system is in place that puts the interests of developing countries first and is able to work as a global safety net. While we see these goals as maybe long-term, we can begin with early wins, such as simplifying processes to access finance. It can also mean revisiting the rules for access to concessional financing to include the swift endorsement of the multi-dimensional vulnerability index. This is key to access to finance. In our role as chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, there are some of the issues we continue to promote in the Pacific region, as well as through the multilateral system that must continue to be voiced with collective vehemence. As we enjoy this evening together, let us take a moment to reflect on the values and principles that the UN and you, Secretary General, embody. your encouragement and emphasis on why the UN is so essential today, as it is giving peace a chance and ending conflicts that jeopardize lives, futures, and global progress, bodes well with us. The importance of making a difference in people's lives, as reflected in the UN's work to end extreme poverty, reduce inequalities in pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals, resonate with us. Interconnected global crises, including increasingly serious natural disasters, make it clear that we have no time to lose and must achieve sustainable development. We acknowledge the focus of the work of the UN in Samoa based on these principles. Alongside the goals of safeguarding the planet, the UN is also ensuring human rights for all, as well as balancing the scales of opportunity and freedom for women and girls. Thank you, Mr. Guterres, for visiting Samoa, albeit briefly. We look forward to the opportunity of further consultations with the Pacific leadership in the coming weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in raising a glass to Antonio Guterres, a remarkable individual whose contributions continue to shape and enrich our world. May we all draw inspiration from his example and strive to make a positive impact in our own endeavors. Mr. Guterres, Manuia.
It is my pleasure to now invite the United Nations Secretary General.
Your Excellency, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. This visit to Samoa is first of all a tribute that I pay to you, Honorable Prime Minister, to your government, to your people, for the permanent leadership that Samoa has shown in defense of justice in relation to small island developing states in today's world. It's not by chance that we have the Samoa Pathway. And your presidency of the AOSIS has been extremely successful, and we have seen its impact in the way the recent COP in Dubai took place, and in the way the conclusions of the COP were so different from the initial documents put on the table, largely sank to the very strong position that small island developing states, and particularly Pacific states, have taken in Dubai. Your leadership is a guarantee that the voice of small island developing states will never be ignored. But this is also a visit of deep solidarity with a country that, to a certain extent, is the victim of the deep injustices of our global governance system. Our multilateral institutions, starting by the United Nations, the Bretton Woods system, many others, were created after the Second World War, when many of today's countries were still under colonial rule. They largely represent the world of 1945, and they were not able until now to integrate the interests of the majority of the developing countries in the world. Talking about the UN, the Security Council, it's clear that when we see a world where conflicts are multiplying, and sometimes in very dramatic situations, and in a context of geopolitical divides, the Security Council is paralyzed. It has a problem of efficiency, but it has also a problem of legitimacy. It doesn't correspond anymore to the world of today. The same can be said about the Bretton Woods system that is too small in relation to the challenges that we face in today's world. And what for me is clear, and it's the objective of the Summit of the Future, is that we must have a serious discussion among all countries in order to find mechanisms to reduce inequalities and injustices, and to create a multilateral system in which all countries can see themselves fully represented according to what they are, and now according to what they were 80 years ago. Now, in this context, it's particularly worrying, the situation of small island developing states. First of all, as you rightly said, you don't contribute to climate change, but you are in the first line of the negative impacts of climate change. And the truth is that until now, it was not possible to mobilize the G20 countries, the countries that represent 80% of the emissions, to make sure that we have the drastic reduction of emissions that is necessary until 2030 if we want to avoid the worst, if we want to keep temperature growth in line with 1.5 degrees limits. That must indeed be considered a real limit. On the other hand, it is also true that not enough attention has been given to adaptation. Countries like Samoa need to invest massively to protect its population against the impact of climate change. We managed to have a commitment to double adaptation finance, but the truth is that we are very far, even taking into account the loss and damage fund that was created, but we don't even know how much it will represent. The truth is that what the international community is investing in support of adaptation to developing countries is a very small fraction of what is necessary. Today I saw a wall that, because of the tsunami and because of the rising sea levels and because of the storms that impact on your country, has been built 3 times. It's time for the international community to understand that the massive investment in adaptation is a must from the point of view of justice, because those that need it are not those that are responsible for the evolution that we are witnessing in relation to climate change. And then we need to look seriously into the mechanisms of finance. We must have, as you rightly said, an international financial architecture that corresponds to the reality of today. But there are a number of things that can be done and must be done, and I sometimes do not understand why they are not done. We need multilateral development banks that are bigger, that are better, and that are bolder. Today, if one looks at the World Bank, the paid-in capital of the World Bank is $22 billion. It is clear it no longer corresponds to the reality of today's world. Many of the multilateral development banks also need to be capitalized. And the advantage of increasing the capital of a bank is that the country that puts the money in that capital doesn't even need to register it as in deficit, because it's acquiring an asset. There is no reason not to recognize the need at the present moment of a very meaningful recapitalization of the international financial institutions. Second, when we distribute special drawing rights, and unfortunately we are not redistributing as many as we should, if they go through the IMF, $1 means $1. If they go through multilateral development banks, $1 can mean $5, because they allow multilateral development banks to go to the market and borrow 5 times the $1 that they receive. When one looks at concessional funding, middle-income countries are not receiving concessional funding. Now we have the multidimensional vulnerability index. But it's a must that it's taken into account in the decisions that will be made by multilateral development banks in relation to the need to give effective concessional funding to those countries that are especially negatively impacted by climate change and have suffered those impacts without having the resources to respond to them. On the other hand, when one looks at today's situation, it is clear that many countries had tourism as its main resource. With the COVID, that resource was lost. Many increased its debt. Others decreased its expenditure, sometimes in education, in health, in infrastructure, with the negative impacts on the population. The truth is that debt relief is something that is not working. Middle-income countries have no access to debt relief. It is absolutely essential that the framework that was created by the G20 and doesn't work is transformed into something that effectively addresses the debt problems of developing countries, especially those that were more dramatically impacted by climate and by the COVID. And I can go on and on and on. It seems that can be done to establish more equality, more justice, but face the resistance of bureaucracies and sometimes face the narrow vision of some that think that power is something that needs to be preserved at all costs, not understanding that when power is adequately redistributed, that also translates itself into an improvement in which all benefit. And that is why we believe governance reforms are necessary, and that is why we believe that we must adapt our multilateral institutions to the needs of today's countries. And I can promise that small island developing states will be in the first line of our concerns and in the first line of our advocacy and in the first line of our action. You are today a group of countries that is absolutely crucial if we want to win the climate change battle and if we want to create conditions for the Sustainable Development Goals to become a reality that unfortunately is being denied to so many people around the world. And we see Samoa as the example of a country that has the will to move forward, that has the resilience to resist, but that requires the resources and the solidarity and the justice in order to be able to achieve the goals that its population deserves. Honorable Prime Minister, you can count on our voice, we can count on our advocacy, we can count on our support, and above all, we can count on our deep solidarity. And I'm extremely grateful for what has been the warm welcome, for what has been the extraordinary, useful interaction that I could have today with your government. And I can promise that what I've learned in Samoa will not stay in Samoa, and I'll try to apply it in everything in which as Secretary General I'm committed to do. Thank you very much. May I raise my glass, first of all, to you and your leadership, but to the people of Samoa. and to its courage, its resilience, and also its admirably warmth and hospitality to the people of Samoa.